Thank you, read by Gwen Pearl. Our next speaker is Andrew, help me out here. Skotnicki, okay. Andrew Skotnicki is a professor of Christian ethics and chair of the Religious Studies Department at Manhattan College. He also taught Christian ethics at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. He did his undergraduate work at Marquette University and received his PhD in Religion and Society from the Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley, California. He has written 3 books: Religion in the Development of the American Penal System, Criminal Justice in the Catholic Church, and most recently, The Last Judgment, Christian Ethics in Legal Culture. May we all welcome Andrew Skotnicki.
Good evening, sisters and brothers. Nice to be with you. A wonderful topic, and I am honored to be here. In his book, The Personhood of God, Jewish theologian Yachanan Muff states that for Jewish people, the understanding of God must bring together 3 preeminent and equally valid qualities: justice, power, and love. And he states that to diminish any of those to the benefit of the other would destroy the whole Jewish understanding of God and God's work in the world. He then states that unlike Judaism, and I think unlike Islam, Christianity takes one of those 3 attributes and not only makes it the central attribute used to describe God, but also does it to the subordination, if not the exclusion, of the other 2. And that one preeminent divine quality is love. Mahatma Gandhi kept only one religious artifact in his home, and that was a picture of Jesus. And Gandhi said, and I quote, "I did once seriously think of embracing the Christian faith. The gentle figure of Christ, so patient, so kind, so loving, so full of forgiveness that he taught his followers not to retaliate when abused or struck, but to turn the other cheek. I thought it was a beautiful example of the perfect human life." Well, that just goes to show that in the case of Christianity, non-Christians often get the essence of the faith better than Christians do. So the disarmingly simple answer to the question of the justification of war in the Christian tradition, correctly given by a Jew and a Hindu, is that Christians are supposed to love everyone. And Oscar Wilde's famous quote notwithstanding, "You don't kill the one you love." Now, I dare say that the unspoken words of many of you are that Christians, throughout much of their history, have been as savage as any religion, as any nation, and as any empire. And that is also sadly correct. But this is both the painful lesson and the bitter irony of trying to understand the justification for war in the Christian tradition. Christians have by and large made peace with the sword for 1,700 years, and more exactly, it will be exactly 1,700 years next month that the Emperor Constantine said he received a vision from God on the night before the Battle of Milvian Bridge. That night, October 27th, 312, Constantine saw a cross in the sky upon which was written in hoc signo vinces. In this sign you will conquer. Constantine then got up and ordered every one of his soldiers to paint the cross on their shield and on their breastplate. The next day, the usurper Maxentius and his followers were defeated. Most of the soldiers of Maxentius who surrendered were slaughtered, and the marriage of Christianity and the state, alas, was consummated. The argument I want to make is that Christians have been making or co-signing the checks for war for the last 1,700 years. But they have had to do it without reference to Christ. They've done it in the name of the natural law. They've done it in the name of the lesser of two evils. They've done it in the name of defense of the Holy Land. They've done it in the name of defense of the homeland. They've done it in the name of response to tyranny. They've done it in the name of democracy. And they've done it in the name of America. But they cannot do it in the name of Jesus. Because you cannot read the Gospels, the core of the Christian message, and hold any other belief but forgiveness and love for everyone. Luke chapter 6. Love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who maltreat you. To the person who strikes you on one cheek, offer the other as well. It's noteworthy how different Christianity was 1,700 years ago. Let's see, September. On September 13th, 312, not to mention on the morning of October 27th, 312, virtually all Christians were pacifists. It was expressly forbidden in the writings of all early popes and all authoritative Christian authors for Christians to bear arms under any circumstances. There were no Christian soldiers because you could not be a Christian. If you were, you would not be admitted into the Christian fellowship because soldiers shed blood and Christians were forbidden to shed anyone's blood for any reason. As Tertullian said at the end of the 2nd century, when Christ told Peter to put away the sword, he unbuckled the scabbard of every soldier. Nor could Christians be judges, because in the role of the judge, he would have to condemn the guilty to bloodshed or even death. And archetypal Christian figures, such as Origen, Ambrose, and Jerome, all use the same quote. The task of the judge is, quote, to make war upon the world, end quote. Now, I'm not here to fault my ancestors in the faith, nor even to criticize my Christian brothers and sisters who might find my remarks disagreeable. I only share to seek my studied knowledge of the Christian tradition and to share with you that the justification for war in Christian history, the just war and the crusade, are based in the latter case upon rhetoric more than either reason or revelation, and in the former case upon reason but not revelation. The crusade, as detestable as it is to many of us, satisfies a Manichaean need, or perhaps in more modern terms a Freudian one, to separate the world into the good, the evil, light, darkness, righteousness and unrighteousness, life and death, with, of course, our side being the side of light and goodness and righteousness and life, and our enemies being the side of darkness, unrighteousness, and death. I am, of course, not just talking about Pope Urban II in the 11th century, who declared the First Crusade. I'm talking about Ronald Reagan and the evil empire. I'm talking about every president of the United States since, who in their bellicose rhetoric find a certain appeal in calling the enemies of the United States creatures of malevolence. The fact are, there are many Christians who find this rhetoric appealing. This cannot be denied. But neither can the fact that the Crusader ideology sanctions guilt-free violence and a wholesale denial of the centrality of unconditional love and the forgiveness that are the central element of the teaching of Jesus. Now, the just war, Rabbi, as you said so well, has an even longer history than the crusade. Perhaps not surprisingly, it's nearly as old as Constantine. For not long after the Battle of the Milvian Bridge, only several decades in fact, St. Augustine penned the just war theory. And many of his esteemed descendants, like St. Thomas Aquinas, continued that particular theory. And their argument was, and again, as the rabbi said so well, since people are going to fight, they might as well do it within a set of moral constraints. And so they argued that war had to be, for example, declared by a competent authority for a just cause, had to be in the national interest, fought only as a last resort. The good to be sought had to be greater than the evil of violence that would be caused. It had to assiduously defend the rights of non-combatants. Now, whether there has ever been a just war, or whether there ever can be one, I will leave for you to decide. But you will note that despite its long and intellectually rich heritage, the longer one peruses the history of the just war, the less the one finds the name of Christ in the endless volumes of prose the concept has spawned. Now, these are not the only ways that Christians have found to evade the hard wood of the cross and the command to suffer rather than to inflict suffering. Ever since the 4th century, they've developed the metaphor of the two persons of the soldier and the executioner to sidestep the early requirement of pacifism. This conceptual sleight of hand has been used repeatedly from Augustine to Martin Luther to Joseph Hooker in the English Reformation. Christians can be soldiers, judges, and executioners in this logic because their private person remains Christian, but in their public persona, they represent the body politic and they represent the will of the state. Thus, they remain free from moral contamination. Another way in which this justification has been framed has been, curiously enough, in the name of love. Some theologians have said Christians can kill as executioners or soldiers because they love their fellow citizens, and in defense of them, they can kill those who would harm them. It's not illogical. It has a certain syllogistic harmony to it. It certainly has abundant pragmatic appeal. The only problem is, it isn't what Jesus did, and it's not what he taught. A marvelous Christian ethicist, H. Richard Niebuhr, once said, "You can't live in the world, and you especially can't live in the West and avoid Jesus. The only question is, do you want to?" I've suggested that we Christians, myself among them, have spent too much of our lives and too much of our intellectual and moral energy trying to escape him. But not to worry. Jesus is always ready to forgive and extend a loving hand of friendship, even to his enemies. The only question left for us is when, if ever, will we?